Coming up on Network Africa. Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu reshuffles his cabinet, naming 7 new ministers, sacking 5 and reassigning 10 others. Nigeria, Algeria, Uganda and 10 others officially joined the BRICS bloc as partner countries. Plus, the United Nations celebrates its 79th anniversary. Hello and welcome to the program. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Layo Olarinde. We begin here in Nigeria, where President Bola Tinubu has reshuffled his 45-member cabinet, naming 7 new ministers, sacking 5 and reassigning 10 others to new portfolios. This is what the presidency says is a bid to reinvigorate the administration's capacity for optimal efficiency. The development, which was announced after the Federal Executive Council meeting, also sees 2 ministries scrapped and 1 renamed. Our State House correspondent Larry Lasisi has more in this report.
The 12th Federal Executive Council meeting commences with the swearing-in of Abdullahi Bello as the chairman of the Code of Conduct Bureau. The meeting proceeds into a closed-door session immediately afterwards. And a few hours later, some ministers arrive to speak on the resolutions of the meeting.
The erstwhile Ministry of Niger Delta has now been renamed Ministry of Regional Development. The President and members of Council today took a decision to rename that ministry so that all these other regional bodies will come under this new Ministry of Regional Development. There is no longer, from today, the Ministry of Sports Development. All activities and programs of the Ministry of Sports Development are now being brought under the National Sports Commission. Number 3, the Ministry of Tourism has also been scrapped. Activities of that ministry are now being brought under the Ministry of Arts, Culture, Tourism, and Creative Economy. So that ministry will now be called Ministry of Arts, Culture, Tourism, and Creative Economy.
A few minutes after the ministers leave, the special advisor to the president arrives with more developments.
The president has approved the immediate implementation of 8 far-reaching actions to reinvigorate the administration's capacity for optimal efficiency, pursuant of its commitment to deliver on its promises to Nigerians.
In addition to the developments earlier outlined by the Minister of Information, the Special Advisor announced new portfolios for some ministers. The Minister of State Education, Honorable Dr. Tanko Sununu, is now Minister of State Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Reduction. The Minister of State Health, Dr. Olatunji Alausa, now Minister of Education. The Minister of State Water Resources, Barrister Bello Goroyo, now Minister of State Works. Minister of Niger Delta Development, Honorable Abubakar Momo, now Minister of Regional Development. And the Minister of State Steel Development, Ubame Geri Amadu, now Minister of State Regional Development. Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Dr. Doris Uzuka Anite, to now be the Minister of State Finance. The Minister of Sports Development, Senator John Eno, will now serve as Minister of State Industry, Trade and Investment. Minister of State Police Affairs, Iman Suleiman Ibrahim, to serve as Minister of Women Affairs. Minister of State for Youth Development, Ayodele Olawande, becomes the Minister for Youth Development. And the Minister of State Environment, Dr. Salako Adeboye, now to serve as Minister of State Health.
These are the following ministers who have been discharged. And as you know, the president met them this afternoon to thank them for their services for the nation. They are as follows: Barrister Huju Ken Oaneye, Minister of Women Affairs; Lola Adejon, Minister of Tourism; Professor Tahir Mama, Minister of Education; Abdullahi Muhammad Guazo, Minister of State Housing and Urban Development; Dr. Jamila Bio Ibrahim, Minister of Youth Development. So only 5 ministers were discharged.
He also announced 7 new ministerial nominees: Dr. Nantawe Yilwalda as Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Reduction; Megeri Dingyadi as Minister of Labor and Employment; Bianca Odumegu Ojukwu as Minister of State Foreign Affairs; Dr. Jomoke Oduwole as Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment; Mukhtar Meha as Minister of Livestock Development; Honorable Yusuf Abdullahi Atta as Minister of State, Housing and Urban Development, and Suwaiba Ahmad as Minister of State, Education, all subject to confirmation by the Senate. 2 other appointments were announced, that of Shehu Diko as the chairman of the National Sports Commission and that of former Minister Sunday Dare as the special advisor to the President on Public Communication and Orientation. From the Presidential Villa, Lanre Lasisi, Channels Television News.
The Republic of Korea is very interested in stability and progress of West Africa and Nigeria in particular. Hence, it takes seriously its relations with the country. Issues relating to Nigeria-South Korea relations were discussed at a joint seminar between the Nigeria Institute of International Affairs and the Republic of Korea in Nigeria. Deputy Head of Mission at the Korean Embassy, Ms. Lee Jung-gwen, says these conversations are necessary to improve bilateral ties. The Director General of the NIIA, Professor Osage Ehosa, says spotlight on diplomacy is as a result of Korean interest in Nigeria and relations between the two dating back to 1980.
Korea has been trying really hard to how to further develop the bilateral relations between Korea and Nigeria. And to do that, we thought that maybe we have to look into each other's diplomatic strategy first so that we can find some connections and how we can develop further the relations between our two countries based on that. So I think we did exactly that today, and I hope today's discussion can lead to the further strengthening of the bilateral relationship between the two countries.
Korea has emerged as one of the industrial centers in the world at this time that Nigeria is reaching out to rich countries for investment in our country, because that's the linchpin of our economic diplomacy and the development pillar of our 4D foreign policy. Korea has come in as a very strategic partner. As you know, the Korean interests in Nigeria are very huge, and it's been recorded that in 2023, Nigeria had more than half of the contracts that Korean companies had all over Africa. So that tells you how very strategic Korea is to Nigeria and to Africa as a whole.
Today, October 24, is United Nations Day, marking the anniversary of the entry into force in 1945 of the UN Charter. With the ratification of this founding document by majority of its signatories, including 5 permanent members of the Security Council, United Nations officially came into being. Well, UN Day is celebrated every year, and this year the UN is celebrating its 79th anniversary. Today, the organization boasts of 193 member states and continues to play a crucial role in global governance. Today is also World Polio Day. According to a new UNICEF analysis of the 541 children affected by polio globally in 2023, 85% live in the 31 fragile, conflict-affected and vulnerable countries. some of those countries here in Africa. In Sudan, national childhood vaccination coverage plummeted from 85% before the war to 53% in 2023, while in active conflict zones, the coverage has dropped to just 30%. Well, UNICEF believes successful polio vaccination campaigns in fragile, conflict-affected and vulnerable countries are critical to stopping further cases and also protecting children who are already vulnerable. Let's discuss further on World Polio Day. Joining us now is Dr. Amina Ahmad, a public health physician here in Lagos. Thank you so much, Doctor, for your time on the program.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
Well, Nigeria has had 4 WHO-certified polio-free years. What is our weakest point in the prevention process, which you think needs strengthening?
Yeah, Nigeria is in its 4th year of certification from polio virus, and then we're going into our 5th year. It's something that we require to strengthen, to keep this way and strengthen further so that we will not have a resurgence of polio outbreak in the country again. And the ways we could do that is by making sure that places where we have gaps on immunization, for instance, the immunization coverage hasn't been very good because of the years of epidemic that we had, the COVID epidemic. It has seriously affected our immunization coverages and all of that. And then you have areas of insecurity, especially in the northern area of the country. So these areas have to be strengthened with immunization so that we would not have polio resurging back into the country through those areas that are of high insecurity because of inability or lack of access to health care. Again, routine immunization has to be strengthened so that every child, especially in hard-to-reach areas, everywhere we can find every child within the country, hard-to-reach areas, riverine areas, areas that are conflict areas, should be reached with the immunization so that we can protect them from having polio virus. Of course, we do not have wild polio virus again in Nigeria, but then there's a possibility that if we do not strengthen these areas, our routine immunization close the gap of our coverages within by campaigns or our insecure areas, and even educating the community on the need to vaccinate our children and having to make sure that they are fully vaccinated for age. Then there's a possibility that this can happen again if we do not hold these places tight and make sure that nothing of such comes back, especially with even the countries that have this, that still have polio in the world, that is Pakistan and Afghanistan.
Indeed. You mentioned, the wild polio virus, and we have not recorded that in 4 years. But experts speak of polio connected to vaccines. Can you throw some light on this? How dangerous is this vaccine-derived polio?
Okay, so yes, we have polio associated with vaccines, and that is what you call vaccine-derived polio virus. However, it occurs as a result of, the virus being passed through stool of somebody that has already been vaccinated. So when you have such happening, and in areas of low vaccination, low immunization coverage, there's a possibility that vaccine-derived polio virus can actually circulate within that community and mutate. It can mutate and represent itself as a virus, as polio virus, and may have the same effect as the polio virus that had been eradicated. However, it is very rare, and it is such that it happens less frequently as the wild polio virus that had been eradicated. However, if we do not do something about it as the outbreaks happen, then there's a possibility that this circulating derived polio virus can actually affect our children in the same way that wild polio virus can affect them, although it's quite rare as we know. And that is why, if you notice what we do, we keep having what you call outbreak responses in the country, month in, month out, so that we would prevent the outbreak of circulating vaccine-derived viruses within our communities, especially in states or in areas where this has been found from environmental surveillance. So we need to actually improve on our surveillance and make sure that once we find a circulating vaccine-derived virus, it is quickly apprehended and then stemmed.
All right then. Thank you so much, Dr. Amina Ahmad, public health physician. Thank you for your time on the program.
Thank you very much, Ma. Thank you for having me.
Welcome back to the program. It's the last day of the BRICS summit taking place in Russia. The alliance has officially added 13 new nations as partner countries. Now they include Nigeria, Algeria, Uganda, Belarus, Bolivia, Cuba, Vietnam, Indonesia, Kazakhstan, Malaysia, Thailand, Turkey, and Uzbekistan. Well, the expansion had been one of the biggest reported topics of discussion on the agenda. At last year's summit, several new countries were invited to join the bloc officially, and that included Egypt and Ethiopia. The aim of the alliance is to challenge the economic and political monopoly of the West. The group sets priorities and has discussions once every year during the summit, where members take turns hosting. Meanwhile, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has met Russian President Vladimir Putin for a bilateral meeting on the sidelines of the BRICS summit in Kazan City. Prime Minister Abiy is attending his first BRICS summit since joining the group of emerging economies earlier. The Russian leader called Ethiopia's integration into the group an important step, hailing the nation's proximity, their diplomatic ties dating back more than a century. In his remarks, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed called for strong intra-BRICS trade in key sectors and investment, presenting his country as the third largest economy in sub-Saharan Africa. In Mozambique, opposition supporters packed into a church in the capital Maputo on Wednesday to mourn an opposition lawyer that was murdered that sparked the post-election unrest in the country. Elvino Diaz was an attorney for the opposition party Podemos, who was killed alongside another party official when multiple rounds were fired at a car in which they were traveling in the early hours of Saturday. Civil society groups claimed the murders were politically motivated. Mozambican President Filipe Nyusi on Wednesday condemned the killings and told people not to jump to conclusions. Well, the country is still waiting for the official result of the October 9 election, but early results show that the ruling Frelimo party is set to extend its 49-year rule. Observers had said that the poll did not meet international standards for democratic elections. Global leaders and advocates have issued a resounding call for stronger efforts to combat the pervasive use of sexual violence as a weapon of war. This was at a high-level United Nations event marking the 15th anniversary of the Mandate on Sexual Violence in Conflict. The event, co-hosted by the UN and multiple governments in New York, reviewed progress and ongoing challenges in preventing these crimes and achieving justice for survivors. UN Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed echoed this call, adding that the scourge of sexual violence continues to hinder progress. Meanwhile, former U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton called out the persistent impunity for perpetrators of sexual violence in conflict.
In 2015, with the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the world pledged to leave no one behind. Yet the scourge of sexual violence continues to hinder progress. From Gaza to Ukraine, from Sudan to Myanmar, from Colombia to the Democratic Republic of Congo, survivors face not just isolation, but often complete social and economic destitution.
Rape and other forms of sexual violence are still too often viewed as collateral damage of war and internal conflict. In too many countries and in too many cases, the perpetrators of this violence still go unpunished, and their impunity encourages further attacks.
Here in Lagos State, the government is allaying fears of residents regarding the release of water from Oyo Dam, assuring that necessary measures are in place to effectively manage the floods.
The inspection tour by the Ministry of Environment and Water Resources, led by the Commissioner, Tokunbo Wahab, kicks off from Majidun area of Ikorodu for a first-hand assessment of the increase in water level. The next port of call is Ijede, still in Ikorodu, for an on-the-spot assessment of the drainage path and ongoing road construction being supervised by the Ministry of Works and Infrastructure. In the Agbede area of Ikorodu, erosion is a major challenge affecting the people, including lack of roads and drainage alignments, but the state government promises to address the situation.
Mr. Governor had approved the second leg of the drainage system to start immediately, and the contractor had been awarded the job, and I believe in the next few days or weeks it should be on site. Once that is done, both sides of the Agbede transformer and Agbede Jesu road will now discharge that stream, and then we now fill it up and get Ministry of Works and Infrastructure to help them put up a road infrastructure in that neighborhood.
Itowolo along Ikorodu Road is affected by the release of water from the Oyo Dam. From Ikorodu to Isheri North GRA, the road has been taken over by flood owing to the gradual release of water from the Oyo Dam. The commissioner meets with the community heads and explains the situation of things.
Some 6 years ago, we committed 5 million from state to
The commissioner says the federal government has approved the dredging of the Oyo Dam, which will reduce the impact of flooding in Isheri, Itowolo, and environs.
We thank Mr. President for awarding the contract for the capital dredging of the Ogun River through Itowolo and expanding the width of it. So when they discharge water from the dam, the water level will not be this high. That contract has been awarded, and I think they started the job around 18th of September. But that is also not enough. We have to come and empathize with people that stay here.
The chairman of Isheri explains what has been done on their path to reduce the impact of flood.
We have the Okparo Canal to the east. It's far from here. It has solved most of the problem that we would have encountered this year. But the one we have in this estate is not too far from here, about 2 kilometers away. It discharges into the river, the Ogun River after Agility. And by the time we did that, we had relief too. This year flood is not massive because there was a collaboration between us and the Ogun State government to dredge the Okparo Canal. And by what he has said, and knowing fully well that the governor of Lagos State is a man of his words, I'm sure that we are going to get relief.
The Lagos State government says it will continue to collaborate with the Ogun State government in order to address the issue of flooding affecting Lagos and Ogun border communities.
And finally, on the program, as part of efforts to ward off attacks by Al-Shabaab militants, thousands of security cameras have been installed across Somalia's capital. Well, officials say the devices are helping the security situation in Mogadishu. However, residents believe that they are creating fresh headaches. The CCTVs were rolled out earlier this year as part of a municipal government initiative. Cameras installed by business owners have helped to surveil the militants and also ensure that the security forces are doing their jobs properly. However, in a city where the militants who have been fighting to overthrow the government for nearly 2 decades have eyes and ears nearly everywhere, installing cameras, analysts say, is a risky proposition.
Who's got focusing? It's yours.
And that's it on the program today. Thank you so much for watching Network Africa. I'm Layo Olarinde.